You want to know what it feels like to watch your husband hand you divorce papers while his mistress giggles beside him? Let me tell you, it's surreal. My husband Trevor slid those documents across the restaurant table with a smirk I'll never forget, thinking he was finally free from the burden of being married to me, the simple, black woman who he met working at his father's hotel. What he didn't know in that moment would destroy him completely. See, I wasn't just some hotel manager he elevated out of poverty. I owned the entire empire he thought belonged to his family. And I was about to remind both of them why you should never underestimate a quiet woman. Before I take you through this whole story, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because what I'm about to share will have you questioning everything you think you know about marriage, money, and revenge. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done if you were in my shoes. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. My name is Candace Morgan, and 6 years ago I thought I'd found my happily ever after. I was 28, working as a manager at the Grand View Hotel in downtown Chicago. That's where I met Trevor Whitmore. He was 32, handsome in that privileged way some men are, with perfect teeth and clothes that cost more than most people's rent. He told me his father owned several hotels and that he was being groomed to take over the family business. I was charmed, I'll admit it. He seemed different from the other wealthy men I'd encountered. Humble, interested in my opinions, curious about my life. We started dating, and for the first time in years, I let my guard down. Trevor would bring me coffee during my shifts, wait for me to get off work, take me to nice restaurants where he knew all the staff by name. He introduced me to his parents within 3 months. Now I should have seen the signs then. His mother, Patricia Whitmore, looked at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. She asked me questions that seemed innocent on the surface but had edges sharp enough to cut. Where did I go to college? What did my parents do? Did I have family in Chicago? Every answer I gave seemed to disappoint her a little more, but Trevor defended me, or at least I thought he did. He'd squeeze my hand under the table and tell his mother that I was brilliant, that I'd worked my way up from nothing, that I was self-made. Looking back now, I realize those weren't compliments. They were explanations, justifications for why he was with someone like me. We got married a year after we met. Small ceremony, mostly his family and friends. My grandmother had passed away 6 years before and I didn't have much family left. Trevor said it was perfect, intimate and elegant. I wore a simple dress because his mother suggested that anything too extravagant would look like I was trying too hard. I should have run right then. But I was in love, or at least I was in love with who I thought he was. The first couple of years of marriage were good, or maybe I was just good at pretending they were. I kept working because I loved my job, and Trevor said he admired my independence. His family made comments about it, though. Why was I still working when Trevor could provide for me? Didn't I want to focus on starting a family? I'd smile and change the subject, but the truth was, Trevor always had an excuse for why we should wait to have children. He wanted to establish his career first, buy a bigger house, travel more. There was always something more important than building a family with me. Around year 3, things started changing. Trevor began working late, missing dinners, canceling plans at the last minute. He was always on his phone, turning the screen away when I walked into the room. When I asked him about it, he'd get defensive, accuse me of being paranoid or insecure. He'd remind me how lucky I was, how most men wouldn't have married someone from my background. Those comments started getting more frequent, more casual, like he was training me to accept them as truth. Then, about 6 months ago, he started mentioning this woman named Bethany Clark. She was a consultant his company had hired, 26 years old, blonde, daughter of some Connecticut family with old money going back generations. At first, it was just her name dropping into conversations. Bethany said this. Bethany suggested that, Bethany thinks we should try this new restaurant. I felt that familiar twist in my stomach that every woman knows, the intuition that something is wrong even when you can't prove it yet. I started paying closer attention. I noticed the new cologne, the extra time he spent at the gym, the way he'd suddenly developed opinions about wine and art that aligned perfectly with things Bethany apparently liked. One evening, I decided to surprise him at his office with dinner. His assistant looked uncomfortable when she saw me, stammering about how Trevor had left early for a business meeting. I knew she was lying. I could see it in her eyes, the pity mixed with awkwardness. I went to the restaurant he'd mentioned that morning, the new French place downtown, and there they were, Trevor and Bethany, sitting at a corner table, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing like they were the only two people in the world. When he saw me, he didn't even have the decency to look guilty. He just smiled, waved me over, and introduced Bethany as his colleague. She shook my hand with this firm, confident grip, and said she'd heard so much about me. The way she said it made me feel like a story he told at parties, not a person he loved. I started finding receipts after that. Jewelry from stores I'd never been to, weekend trips to places we'd never visited together, charges at expensive hotels in cities where he claimed to be having business meetings. I could have confronted him then, but something told me to wait. I wanted to see just how far he'd go, how completely he'd betray me when he thought I had no power to stop him. 3 weeks ago, Trevor asked me to meet him at Marcello's, this upscale Italian restaurant where we'd had our first anniversary dinner. He said we needed to talk about our future, that it was important. I knew what was coming. You develop a sixth sense for these things when you've been watching your marriage dissolve in slow motion. I walked into that restaurant wearing my best dress, my head held high, my face calm. And there she was, Bethany, sitting next to my husband in the booth where we'd once celebrated our love, looking at me with something between pity and triumph. Trevor didn't even stand up when I arrived. He just gestured to the empty seat across from them like this was a business meeting. "Candace," he said, and his voice had this rehearsed quality to it, like he'd practiced this speech in the mirror. "I think we both know this hasn't been working for a while. You're a good person, but we want different things. We come from different worlds, and I think it's time we both admit that this was a mistake." He slid a folder across the table. Divorce papers. I could see Bethany's hand move to his thigh under the table, that smug little smile playing at her lips. She was enjoying this. They both were. "I've tried to be fair," Trevor continued, not even having the decency to look uncomfortable. "You can keep your car, and I'm offering you $50,000 to help you get back on your feet. The house, the other assets, those stay with me. They came from my family after all. You understand." I opened the folder, scanning the papers. It was all there, his version of our marriage reduced to legal terms. According to these documents, I'd brought nothing to the marriage, contributed nothing, deserved nothing. I was a footnote in his life story, easily erased. Bethany leaned forward, and I'll never forget what she said. "You have to understand, Candace, Trevor needs someone from his world, someone who understands the pressures of his lifestyle, who can navigate his social circles. You tried your best, but some things you just can't learn. You were always just playing dress-up in a life that was never really yours." Other diners were watching now, pretending not to, but definitely listening. I could feel their eyes on us, could imagine what they were thinking. Poor black woman getting dumped in public by her wealthy white husband and his newer, younger, whiter replacement. It was like something out of a bad movie, except this was my life. Trevor had the audacity to reach across the table like he was going to pat my hand comfortingly. "You should actually thank me, Candace. These 6 years with me, you've had opportunities you never would have had otherwise. You've lived in a beautiful home, worn nice clothes, traveled to places you never could have afforded. I elevated you, but now it's time for both of us to move on to where we really belong." That last part, where we really belong, the racial undertone wasn't even subtle anymore. He was telling me that I'd had my time playing in his world, and now it was time to return to my place, below him, below them, below everyone in this restaurant who was watching this humiliation unfold. I should have been crying. I should have been angry, begging, making a scene. That's what they expected. That's what they wanted. Instead, I felt this calm wash over me, this clarity I hadn't experienced in months. I picked up the pen that Trevor had so thoughtfully provided and signed those papers without reading a single word. "You'll hear from my lawyer in 3 days, I said, my voice steady and clear. Then I looked at Bethany, really looked at her, and smiled. Enjoy your prize. You earned him. I stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and walked out of that restaurant with my head high and my shoulders back. Behind me, I could hear them celebrating, probably ordering champagne to toast their new beginning. Let them have their moment. They had no idea what was coming. Now, here's what Trevor didn't know, what nobody knew except my lawyers and the property management company I'd hired years ago. My grandmother, Louise Morgan, wasn't just any woman. She was a force of nature who'd built a real estate empire starting in the 1960s when banks wouldn't even look at loan applications from black women. She'd faced redlining, discrimination, threats, and every obstacle that racist America could throw at her. And she'd won anyway. My grandmother started with one small apartment building in Detroit, bought with money she'd saved working 3 jobs. She fixed it up herself, learned plumbing and electrical work because she couldn't afford to hire people. She rented to families that other landlords wouldn't touch. Black families, immigrant families, anyone who needed a chance. And slowly, building by building, she expanded. By the time I was born, she owned properties in 12 states, a portfolio worth hundreds of millions of dollars. When I was 22, still in law school at Northwestern, my grandmother died. She left everything to me, her only grandchild, the daughter of her daughter who'd passed away when I was young. Suddenly, I was worth over $400 million. I had hotels, apartment complexes, commercial buildings, land holdings. I had more wealth than most people could imagine in a lifetime. But here's the thing about coming into money that young. You learn quickly who wants you and who wants what you have. I'd had relationships fall apart the moment men found out about my inheritance. They'd either become intimidated or start seeing me as a bank account instead of a person. So when I finished law school with my degree in corporate law, I made a decision. I was going to hide it all. I set up a management company to handle my properties anonymously. I took a job as a hotel manager, at one of my own hotels actually, and lived modestly. I wanted to meet someone who would love me for who I was, not what I had. I wanted to know that when someone said they loved me, they meant Candace, not my bank balance. So when Trevor met me, he thought I was just a hard-working hotel manager with a decent salary and no family money. What he didn't know was that the family business he kept bragging about. His father's company managed 3 of my hotels under contract. Trevor's executive position? He was reporting to managers who reported to my management company. His salary, his car, his lifestyle, all of it was funded by contracts that I had personally approved. Even the house we lived in, the one he was so generously letting me leave with nothing, I'd bought it with cash. I'd put only his name on the deed as a test. I wanted to see if he'd be the kind of man who'd use that power fairly or hold it over my head. Now I had my answer. For 6 years, I'd been watching and waiting, hoping that Trevor would prove himself worthy of knowing the truth. I'd been ready to reveal everything, to bring him into my real world, to build something genuine together. But month by month, year by year, he'd shown me exactly who he was. The comments about my background, the way he'd talked down to service workers, the casual racism he thought was just honesty, the way he needed to feel superior to feel secure. It all added up. And now, sitting in my lawyer's office with all my financial documents spread across the conference table, I felt nothing but relief. Gerald Thompson, one of the best divorce attorneys in Illinois, looked at me with something like awe. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "when you're ready, we can file a countersuit that will change everything. But I have to ask, why did you wait so long?" I smiled. "Because I needed to be absolutely sure. Now I am." The countersuit hit Trevor's lawyer like a bomb. We filed a complete financial disclosure. Every property, every asset, every dollar I owned. We demanded that Trevor vacate my house within 30 days, return the car I'd bought, and compensate me for emotional distress. We included copies of all those receipts I'd found, evidence of his affair, documentation of his fraudulent claims about assets he didn't own. Trevor received the papers at his office on a Tuesday morning. I know because my lawyer had arranged for a process server to deliver them personally, right in front of his colleagues. My phone had been ringing non-stop since I walked out of that restaurant, but I'd blocked his number. Now he knew why I hadn't answered. People ask me if I regret the test, if I wish I'd told Trevor the truth from the beginning. The answer is no. Because if I'd told him from day one, I never would have known who he really was. He would have played the role of supportive husband, would have hidden his true feelings, and maybe I would have wasted even more than 6 years on him. This way, I know exactly what I escaped. I'm open to love again eventually, but I'm smarter now. I know the signs, know the questions to ask, know how to spot a man who loves me versus a man who loves what he thinks I can do for him. My next relationship will be built on truth from the beginning, but only after I'm sure he can handle it. So that's my story. Trevor thought he was trading up, thought he was leaving behind someone beneath him to be with someone from his world. Instead, he lost everything. His job, his reputation, his dignity, chasing a woman who only wanted him for what he pretended to have. Karma has a beautiful way of teaching lessons to people.